Two men were about to drag her out of the cafe when a stranger slid into the chair beside her and wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "Pretend you're my wife," he whispered, as if her life depended on it, because it did. When she stood up and walked out with him, she had no idea she'd just stepped into a war and become the most dangerous weakness a mafia boss could have. If this story pulled you in, go ahead and subscribe so you never miss what's ahead. I've got another unforgettable story coming tomorrow. And while you're here, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing people tuned in from all over the world. Okay, let's get back into it. The candle between them had burned down to a stub, wax pooling onto the brass rim like tears Clara Robinson refused to shed. She sat alone at Café Lumière on the corner of 5th and Morrison, the kind of European-style bistro where everything whispered old money and the waitstaff moved like choreographed dancers around marble-top tables. Rain streaked the floor-to-ceiling windows, turning the October evening into something out of a film she couldn't afford to see. She'd chosen the corner table deliberately, the one tucked near the window but far enough from the main floor that she could disappear into the amber glow of Edison bulbs and flickering candlelight. Her black coat was draped across her shoulders over a dusty rose dress that had seen better days, the fabric soft and worn in places she hoped the dim lighting would hide. She kept her hood low, dark hair falling around her face like a curtain she could hide behind. The two men at the bar had been watching her for 23 minutes. She'd counted. They nursed whiskeys they didn't drink, speaking to each other in voices too low to hear, but their eyes never stopped tracking her movements, the way she shifted in her seat, the way her fingers trembled against the white tablecloth, the way she kept glancing at her phone, waiting for instructions that might never come. 29 years old, widow, alone in a cafe where a single espresso cost $12, and she'd ordered only water. She'd been surviving on insurance scraps for 2 years, just enough to cover rent if she didn't eat much, just enough to avoid eviction if she ignored the phone calls from numbers she didn't recognize. Her husband's death had been ruled accidental. A fall. Concrete. Gone before the ambulance arrived. But the whispers told different stories. Stories about gambling debts and underground lenders and men who collected what desperate people owed. Mrs. Jensen, her elderly neighbor, had finally told her the truth 3 months after the funeral. "Your husband owed money, dear. The kind you don't borrow from banks." The envelope in her purse felt heavier than it should. Cream-colored, embossed with a law firm's letterhead. Final notice stamped in red ink across the front. Eviction proceedings. Asset seizure. Clinical words that meant losing the last place that still smelled like him. Tonight, one of those unknown numbers had finally reached her. A woman's voice, professional and cold. Café Lumière, Tuesday, 8:30. Someone will meet you to discuss resolution. Resolution. As if debt could be resolved when she had nothing left to give. Clara pulled her coat tighter and checked her phone. 8:32. The men at the bar shifted. One checked his watch. The other's hand disappeared inside his jacket. Her breath caught. The chair beside her scraped against marble tile. She didn't turn, didn't breathe, just stared at the candle flame guttering in its glass prison. "Don't look at them." The voice was male, low, controlled the kind of voice that didn't need volume to command a room. It came from beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat of him, smell expensive cologne and cigarette smoke and something darker underneath. "They're not here for you anymore." Her head turned before she could stop it. He was closer than she'd expected. Dark suit, perfectly tailored, no tie. The top buttons of his shirt were undone, revealing the edge of black ink curling up his neck. Tattoos that looked deliberate, earned rather than chosen. His face was angular and handsome in a way that felt dangerous, with dark eyes that studied her like she was a problem requiring calculation. His hair was slicked back, dark and perfectly styled. He looked like money, old money, the kind that came with power and violence in equal measure. His arm moved casual, deliberate, draping across her shoulders with the easy confidence of someone who'd never been refused anything. His thumb came to rest near her collarbone, steady, warm through the thin fabric of her dress. "Pretend you're my wife," he murmured, leaning close enough that his breath stirred the hair at her temple. "Stand up, walk with me." Clara froze, every muscle locked, every instinct screamed. "I don't," the words caught in her throat. "I don't know you. You don't need to." His voice was quiet, almost gentle, but there was steel underneath. "Those men at the bar? They work for people I'd rather not embarrass tonight, but if you stay here alone, they'll take you somewhere we can't get you back from." We, as if she belonged to someone, as if she'd already agreed. She glanced toward the bar, just a flicker of movement, barely a look, and saw them staring now, not with interest anymore, with shock. And beneath it, something that looked like fear. The stranger's fingers pressed gently against her shoulder. Not forcing, guiding. Smile, he whispered, like you belong to me. Clara didn't know who he was, didn't know what debt he'd just claimed or what price she'd pay for this protection. But when she looked into those dark eyes, cold and unreadable, and somehow certain, she knew one thing with absolute clarity. He was more dangerous than anyone waiting for her tonight, and he was offering her a choice the men at the bar never would. She smiled. Small, uncertain, but enough. Good girl, he said softly, and stood. He offered his hand, long fingers, more tattoos curling across his knuckles, a silver ring on his right hand that caught the candlelight. She took it. His grip was firm, warm, possessive in a way that made her pulse spike. He pulled her up with practiced ease, keeping her close against his side as they turned toward the cafe entrance. His arm stayed around her shoulders, thumb still pressed against her collarbone like a brand. The men at the bar didn't move, didn't follow. Just watched them leave with faces gone carefully blank. Outside, rain had turned the sidewalk slick and black. City lights reflected in puddles like scattered stars. A black car idled at the curb, expensive. Tinted windows, engine purring. He opened the back door without releasing her. Get in, he said quietly. And she did, because somewhere between the candle and the rain, and the weight of his hand against her skin, Clara Robinson had stopped being the poor widow sitting alone at table 7. She'd become someone worth claiming. The leather seat was cold against Clara's legs as the car door closed with a heavy, final thunk. She pressed herself against the far side of the back seat, coat clutched tight around her shoulders, watching the stranger slide in beside her with the fluid grace of a predator. He didn't crowd her, didn't touch her, just settled into the seat and tapped twice on the partition separating them from the driver. The car pulled smoothly into traffic. Rain drummed against the roof. City lights blurred past the tinted windows, turning the world outside into watercolor streaks of gold and white and red. Inside, the silence was suffocating. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. Her fingers found the door handle, grip tightening around cold metal. Locks are automatic, he said, without looking at her. His voice was calm, matter of fact. But you're not a prisoner. If you want out, I'll let you out. She didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at his profile, sharp jawline, the tattoos creeping up from his collar, the silver ring catching light as his fingers drummed once against his knee. Who are you? The question came out smaller than she'd intended. He turned to face her then, dark eyes, studying her with an intensity that made her feel exposed, seen in a way she hadn't been in 2 years. Isaac Vega, he said simply. The name meant nothing to her. She shook her head, confusion and fear twisting together in her chest. I don't understand. Those men, why were they? Waiting for you. Isaac's gaze didn't waver. They work for the Rossi family, East Side operations, loan enforcement mostly. They were there to collect what your husband owed. The air left Clara's lungs in a rush. I don't have anything. The insurance barely. I know. He cut her off gently but firmly. Your husband, Thomas Robinson, borrowed $63,000 18 months before he died. The terms were clear. The interest was manageable. But he stopped paying 6 months in. Clara's vision blurred. She pressed her palm against the window, needing something solid, something real. He told me we were fine. He said business was good. He said, he lied. The words hit like a slap. Isaac leaned forward slightly, elbows resting on his knees, hands clasped loosely between them. The debt passed to you when he died, standard practice in these circles. But here's what doesn't make sense. Mrs. Robinson, I control. 5th and Morrison, that cafe, the surrounding blocks, the docks 3 miles east. It's my territory. Anyone operating collection in my area clears it through me first. Clara's breathing was shallow now, panic crawling up her throat. I don't understand what that means. It means, Isaac's voice dropped lower, harder. No one authorized those men to be there tonight. No one cleared your debt for collection. Someone sent them anyway. The car turned left, away from her neighborhood, heading toward the glittering high-rises of the financial district. Clara's pulse spiked. Where are we going? Somewhere safe while I figure out who's playing games with my territory. Isaac straightened, reaching into his jacket. Clara flinched, but he only pulled out a phone, sleek, black, expensive. He typed something quickly, then looked at her again. Your husband didn't just borrow money, Clara. He borrowed it from people connected to my operations, but I never authorized the loan, and I sure as hell didn't authorize tonight's collection attempt. Then who did? That's what I intend to find out. He slipped the phone back into his pocket. Someone's using your debt to provoke something, to test boundaries, to see if I'm paying attention. Clara's mind raced, trying to process information that didn't fit together. My husband, he just owned a small business. Import goods. He didn't. Import goods. Isaac's expression shifted, something dangerous flickering behind his eyes. What kind of goods? Electronics. Small shipments from overseas. He had a warehouse on the East Docks, but it closed after he died. I couldn't afford to keep it running. Isaac was quiet for a long moment. Too quiet. When he spoke again, his voice was carefully controlled. East Docks. Which terminal? 7. Why does that? Terminal 7 is Rossi territory. Or it was until 3 years ago when I bought the operational rights. Isaac's jaw tightened. Your husband was importing through a terminal that changed hands. Someone either didn't tell him, or he didn't care. The pieces were falling into place, but the picture they formed made Clara's stomach turn. You're saying my husband was smuggling something. I'm saying your husband was a middleman who didn't know the game changed while he was playing it. Isaac's gaze softened, just fractionally. And when he couldn't pay, someone decided to use his debt as leverage against me. Clara pressed her hands against her face, coat slipping from her shoulders. 2 years. 2 years of grief and shame, and struggling to survive. And it had all been part of something bigger, something she'd never asked for. I didn't know, she whispered. I swear to God I didn't know any of this. I believe you. She looked up sharply. Why? Because if you'd known, you wouldn't have shown up alone tonight wearing a dress you bought 2 years ago with an eviction notice in your purse. Isaac's voice was quiet but certain. You'd have run, or you'd have asked for help. You wouldn't have sat in that cafe like a lamb waiting for slaughter. Tears burned hot behind Clara's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of this stranger, who somehow knew more about her life than she did. The car slowed, pulling into an underground garage beneath a building made entirely of glass and steel. Security cameras tracked their movement. Armed guards stood at checkpoints wearing suits that didn't quite hide their weapons. Isaac opened his door and stepped out, then turned back to offer Clara his hand. She stared at it, at the tattoos, the ring, the steady certainty of his palm. I can relocate you, he said quietly. Tonight. New city, new name. You'll never see those men again. Clara's throat tightened. And the debt? Disappears. Just like that? Just like that. She should take it. She should run as far and as fast as this dangerous man would let her. But something in her chest, something that had been buried under grief and shame, ignited. No. Isaac's eyebrows rose. No? Clara stepped out of the car without taking his hand, coat falling to the leather seat behind her. She stood in her worn, dusty rose dress under fluorescent lights and met his dark eyes with fire she'd forgotten she possessed. I want answers first. About my husband. About what really happened. About all of it. For the first time that night, Isaac Vega smiled. Then come with me, Mrs. Robinson. Let's find out who's been lying to you. Isaac's penthouse occupied the entire 42nd floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. A sprawling canvas of lights and shadows that made Clara feel like she was floating above the world she'd been drowning in for 2 years. The interior was all clean lines and dark wood, leather furniture arranged with precision, abstract art on the walls that probably cost more than her late husband's entire estate. Everything screamed money and control, and a life so far removed from her own, it might as well have been fiction. A woman in her 50s appeared from a side hallway, gray hair pulled into a neat bun, kind eyes, sensible shoes. She smiled warmly at Clara. This is Rosita, Isaac said, shrugging out of his suit jacket. She manages the household. She'll show you to a guest room and get you whatever you need. Clara stood frozen in the entrance, still clutching her coat. I can't stay here. You can and you will. At least for tonight. Isaac draped his jacket over the back of a chair and rolled up his shirt sleeves, revealing more tattoos that snaked up his forearms' intricate patterns, symbols she didn't recognize. Those men know your face now, your address, where you shop, where you work. You go home, they'll be waiting. The truth of it settled over her like ice water. She had nowhere else to go. No family she could trust. Mrs. Jensen was too old to be caught in whatever this was. And Camila, her best friend, had 2 kids and a husband who worked 3rd shift. Clara couldn't bring this darkness to her door. "Just tonight," she whispered. Isaac nodded once. "Just tonight. Until I know what we're dealing with." Rosita guided Clara down a hallway into a guest bedroom that was larger than her entire apartment. Cream-colored walls, a bed that looked like it belonged in a hotel, an ensuite bathroom with marble counters and towels so soft they felt like clouds. "There are clothes in the closet," Rosita said gently. "Probably too big, but better than sleeping in that dress. I'll bring you tea, yes? Something to help you rest." Clara managed a nod, and then she was alone. She sank onto the edge of the bed, coat pooling around her waist, and finally let the tears come, silent, hot, 2 years of grief and rage and fear spilling out in the safety of a stranger's home. Her husband had lied. About the business, about the money, about everything. She'd mourned a man who'd never existed. Clara didn't sleep. She changed into the oversized shirt and soft pants Rosita had left, drank the chamomile tea that appeared on the nightstand, and stared at the city lights until her eyes burned. At 3 a.m, she gave up. The penthouse was quiet as she padded barefoot down the hallway, following the glow of light coming from what looked like an office. The door was partially open. Isaac sat behind a massive desk, shirt unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves still rolled up, surrounded by papers and file folders and a laptop that cast blue light across his face. He didn't look up when she appeared in the doorway. "Can't sleep either?" he asked. "I need to see them." He glanced up then, dark eyes questioning. "The files," Clara clarified, stepping into the room. "Whatever you have on my husband, on the debt, I need to see all of it." Isaac studied her for a long moment, then pushed back from the desk and gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Sit." She did. He slid a manila folder across the polished surface. "This is everything we pulled on Thomas Robinson. Financial records, transaction histories, the loan documents. It's not pretty." Clara opened the folder with trembling hands. The first page was a loan agreement dated 18 months before Thomas died. $63,000. Interest rate, 15% monthly. Collateral, future shipments through Terminal 7. Her vision blurred. 15% monthly? Standard for underground lending. High risk, high reward. Isaac's voice was clinical, detached. He made 3 payments, then nothing. She flipped through bank statements she'd never seen, accounts opened in Thomas's name that she hadn't known existed. Withdrawals, transfers to offshore accounts, payments to casinos in Atlantic City and Las Vegas. Her hands shook harder. He told me he was visiting suppliers, business trips. He'd be gone for days and come back exhausted, and I believed him because I loved him, and I thought. The words choked off. Isaac reached across the desk and gently closed the folder. "You thought he was working to build a future with you." Clara pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to stop the tears. "I was so stupid. You were trusting. There's a difference." She looked up at him, this dangerous man with his tattoos and his empire and his unexpected kindness, and something cracked open inside her chest. "I spent 2 years thinking I wasn't enough. That if I'd been a better wife, if I'd paid more attention, if I'd been less focused on my own career, maybe he wouldn't have, maybe I could have saved him. His choices weren't your fault, Clara. But I carried them anyway." Her voice broke. His debts, his lies, his shame. I carried all of it alone, because I thought that's what you do when you love someone. You carry their weight even after they're gone. Isaac was quiet for a moment. Then he stood and moved around the desk, settling into the chair beside her, instead of across from her, close enough that she could see the fine details of his tattoos, the small scar above his left eyebrow, the exhaustion in his eyes that probably mirrored her own. "Your husband made a deal with people who don't forgive debt," he said quietly. "But the loan itself, the original $63,000 that should have come through my network. Every major loan in this city gets cleared through me or one of 2 other families. It's how we avoid wars over territory and collection rights." Clara frowned. "But you said you didn't authorize it." "Exactly." Isaac's jaw tightened. "Which means someone deliberately bypassed protocol. They wanted your husband in debt. They wanted leverage, and when he died accidentally or otherwise, they transferred that leverage to you." The implications crashed over her like cold water. Someone killed him. Maybe. Or he really did fall. But either way, his death was convenient for someone building a case against me. Isaac's gaze turned fierce. "You weren't just bait tonight, Clara. You were a message. A test to see if I'd protect territory that was technically mine, but practically ignored. And you did? Yes. Why? He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, because you sat in that cafe wearing a dress you couldn't afford to replace, waiting to negotiate a debt you didn't deserve to carry, and you didn't run, you didn't cry. You didn't beg, you just waited. Like you'd already accepted that the world was cruel and there was nothing left to do but face it with whatever dignity you had left. His hand moved slowly, carefully, and brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb. I've seen a lot of people break under less, Clara Robinson. But you didn't break. You bent. And that's rarer than you know. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only feel the warmth of his hand against her face and the weight of truth settling between them. What happens now? She whispered. Isaac's expression hardened. Now we find out who set this in motion, and we make them regret it. Morning light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, turning the city below into gold and glass. Clara woke, disoriented, wrapped in sheets softer than anything she'd ever owned, in a room that smelled like expensive laundry detergent and safety. It took 3 full seconds to remember where she was. Isaac Vega's penthouse, 42nd floor, a world away from the cramped apartment with its leaking faucet and unpaid bills stacked on the kitchen counter. She found Rosita in the kitchen, a gleaming space of marble and stainless steel pouring coffee into delicate porcelain cups. Good morning, Mija. The older woman smiled warmly. Sit. I made breakfast. Clara perched on a bar stool, accepting the coffee with both hands. The kitchen opened onto the main living area where 3 men in dark suits spoke in low voices near the windows, not threatening. Just present, watching, security, Rosita explained quietly, following Clara's gaze. Mr. Vega doesn't take chances. Where is he? Conference call. He'll be out soon. Rosita slid a plate across the counter, scrambled eggs, toast, fresh fruit arranged like art. Eat. You're too thin. Clara wasn't hungry, but she ate anyway because Rosita watched her with the same concerned expression Mrs. Jensen used to wear, because kindness, even from strangers, felt too precious to refuse. She was finishing her coffee when Isaac emerged from the hallway, phone pressed to his ear, speaking rapid Italian. He'd changed into fresh clothes, black shirt, black slacks, silver watch that caught the light. His hair was still damp from a shower. He looked different in daylight. Less dangerous, somehow. More human. He ended the call and pocketed his phone, dark eyes finding Clara immediately. You slept. It wasn't a question. A few hours. She set down her cup carefully. What happens now? You said we'd find out who. I have people looking into it. Isaac crossed to the coffee maker, pouring himself a cup with practiced efficiency. But that's not why I needed you awake. We need to talk about your living situation. Clara's stomach tightened. I told you. I can't afford to relocate. I have a job. You had a job, Isaac interrupted gently. You were a bookkeeper for Morrison and Associates. Small accounting firm. $23,000 a year. No benefits. You were 2 weeks away from being let go due to budget cuts. The blood drained from Clara's face. How did you? I know everything about you, Clara. I had to. The moment I sat down at that cafe, you became my responsibility. He took a drink of coffee, watching her over the rim. Your lease is month to month. You have $1,400 in savings. Your car was repossessed 9 months ago. You take the bus to work and you buy groceries at the discount market on 7th because it's cheaper even though it's 6 blocks farther from your apartment. Clara stood abruptly, chair scraping against polished floor. You had no right to. I had every right. Isaac's voice was calm but unyielding. Someone is using you to get to me. That makes you leverage. And leverage needs to be protected or eliminated. I chose protection. That requires information. I'm not leverage. I'm a person. You're both. He set down his cup. And right now, being a person makes you vulnerable. So until I know who's playing this game and why, you stay here. Under guard. Safe. Clara's hands curled into fists. You can't just decide that. You can't just keep me here like some kind of... I can and I will. Isaac moved closer, and she saw something flicker in his expression. Not anger, something softer. You asked for answers last night. You demanded truth. This is the truth, Clara. You go home, you die. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow. But the moment you step back into your old life, you become a target that I can't protect because I won't see the bullet coming. The words hit like ice water. Clara sank back onto the bar stool, legs suddenly unsteady. For how long? Until it's over. And what does over look like? Isaac was quiet for a moment, then gestured toward the windows. Come here, I want to show you something. She followed him to the glass wall overlooking the city. From this height, everything looked small, manageable, like problems that could be solved with the right perspective. Isaac pointed east toward the waterfront. See those shipping containers? The docks your husband used? That's Terminal 7. I control everything that moves through there. Imports, exports, inventory tracking. It's worth approximately $43 million annually. He shifted, pointing south. That warehouse district? Mine. The trucking company that moves goods from port to distribution centers? Also mine. I employ 300 people. Their families depend on the infrastructure I built staying stable. Clara stared at the city sprawling below, trying to comprehend the scale of what he was describing. 3 years ago, the Rossi family controlled the East Docks, Isaac continued. They were bleeding money, cutting corners, letting dangerous shipments through because they couldn't afford proper security. People died, workers, civilians, so I made them an offer sell to me, or I shut down their operations entirely and let the feds sort through what's left. They sold, Clara guessed. They sold, and I cleaned house. New protocols, new security, legal operations only. His jaw tightened. But the Rossis never forgave me for taking their crown jewel. They've been looking for ways to destabilize me ever since, and your husband, whether he knew it or not, gave them an opening. Clara turned to face him. By borrowing money he couldn't repay. By borrowing money that was never properly authorized. Someone inside my organization, or someone pretending to be inside my organization, extended that loan specifically to create chaos. When he couldn't pay, they could either collect from you publicly and make me look weak, or kill you and start a war by making it look like I ordered it. The magnitude of it made her dizzy. I'm just collateral damage. You were supposed to be. Isaac's expression hardened. But I didn't let them have you, and that changes everything. A phone buzzed. One of the security guards answered, spoke quietly, then approached Isaac with urgent eyes. Sir, we have movement on the east side. Rossi soldiers asking questions about the woman from the café. They're showing your photo, Mrs. Robinson. Clara's blood went cold. Isaac's face became a mask cold, calculating, lethal. He turned to Rosita. Increase security. No one in or out without my direct authorization. Then to Clara. Pack whatever you need from the guest room. You're moving to the secure floor. The secure floor? Private elevator. Biometric locks. Bulletproof glass. His dark eyes held hers. The war just started, Clara. And like it or not, you're in it now. The secure floor was smaller than the main penthouse one-bedroom. A sitting area. Reinforced walls that Clara could feel closing in around her, even though the space was beautifully appointed. The windows here were smaller, the glass noticeably thicker, and 2 armed guards stood stationed outside the single elevator entrance. A gilded cage was still a cage. Clara spent 3 days there. 3 days of Rosita bringing meals, of Isaac appearing for brief updates, before disappearing again into meetings conducted in Italian and Spanish behind closed doors. 3 days of watching the city continue without her while she existed in suspended animation 45 floors above the world. On the 4th morning, she snapped. I need to leave, she told Isaac when he arrived with his morning coffee and his perpetually furrowed brow. Just for an hour. A walk. Fresh air. Anything. He didn't even look up from his phone. No, I'm not asking permission. That got his attention. He set down his coffee, dark eyes studying her with that unnerving intensity. You're not a prisoner, Clara, but you're also not stupid. You know what's waiting out there. I know I'm going insane in here. She gestured at the elegant space that felt more like a tomb with each passing hour. You have people looking for answers. You have security everywhere. You have the entire city mapped out like a chessboard, but I'm just sitting here, waiting. Like I've been waiting for 2 years. Isaac's jaw tightened. What do you want from me? I want to matter. I want to be part of finding out who did this, instead of being the helpless widow you have to protect. You do matter. That's why you're here. No, I'm leverage here. You said it yourself. Clara moved closer, refusing to back down even when every instinct screamed that confronting a man like Isaac Vega was dangerous. I spent 2 years carrying my husband's shame. I'm not spending another day being someone's weakness. For a long moment, he just stared at her. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. Small. Almost invisible. But there, get dressed, he said quietly. Something comfortable. You're coming with me. 20 minutes later, Clara found herself in the back of Isaac's car again, but this time heading away from the city center toward the industrial waterfront. The secure guard's 2 men Isaac called Torres and Mitchell sat in the front seat, weapons visible in shoulder holsters. Where are we going? Clara asked. You wanted to matter. Isaac didn't look at her, just watched the warehouses and shipping containers slide past the window. So you're going to help me with something I can't do alone. They pulled up to a modest office building, tucked between 2 larger warehouses. The sign read, Coastal Imports, in faded letters. Isaac's hand found the small of Clara's back as he guided her inside, through a lobby that smelled like old coffee and paper, up a narrow staircase to the 2nd floor. A woman in her 60s sat behind a desk buried in file folders. She looked up when they entered, her expression shifting from confusion to recognition to fear in rapid succession. Mr. Vega, she stammered, standing quickly. I didn't know you were coming. I would have. Sit down, Patricia. Isaac's voice was calm but commanding. This is Clara Robinson. She needs to see her late husband's shipping records. Everything from the last 2 years he was alive. Patricia's eyes widened. I'm not sure I'm authorized to. You're authorized. Isaac pulled out a chair for Clara, then leaned against the desk with casual authority. Thomas Robinson used this office to coordinate his imports through Terminal 7. I need to know exactly what he was shipping, where it came from, and who he was working with. The older woman's hands trembled as she turned to her computer. It'll take me a few minutes to pull everything. We'll wait. Clara sank into the chair, heart pounding. She glanced at Isaac. You think his shipments are connected to the debt? I think your husband was moving product he didn't declare, and someone was using him to do it. Isaac's expression was unreadable. The question is whether he knew what he was carrying. Patricia printed stack after stack of documents, customs forms, shipping manifests, payment receipts. Clara spread them across an empty desk, and for the first time in 4 days, she felt useful. This was what she knew. Numbers, records, finding patterns in data. Isaac watched her work, silent and focused. Here, Clara said after 30 minutes, pointing to a series of shipments. These don't match. He declared electronics small shipments, low value. But the container weights are off. Way off. A shipment of phones and laptops shouldn't weigh 3 tons. Isaac leaned over her shoulder, close enough that she could smell his cologne. What else? The payment structure is weird. He's paying port fees that don't align with the declared value, like he's paying for extra security that shouldn't be necessary for legal goods. Because they weren't legal goods. Isaac's voice was hard. He was running something else in those containers. Weapons, probably. Maybe pharmaceuticals. Clara's stomach turned. He wouldn't. He would, and did. Isaac straightened, pulling out his phone. Patricia, I need copies of everything. Every record Thomas Robinson touched in the last 3 years. The woman nodded, fingers flying over the keyboard. Clara stared at the documents, at the evidence of her husband's crimes laid bare in black and white. He used me. All those nights he came home exhausted, telling me about supplier meetings and shipping delays, and he was smuggling weapons. He was a middleman, Isaac corrected quietly. Someone else was running the operation. Your husband was just the face, the legitimate business owner who could sign customs documents without raising red flags. And when he wanted out, they killed him, or let him die. Same result. The elevator dinged behind them. Torres appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. Sir, we have a problem. Isaac's entire body went rigid. Talk. Rossi soldiers just hit Mrs. Robinson's apartment building, kicked in her door, tore the place apart looking for documents. Clara's breath caught. Mrs. Jensen, my neighbor. She's fine, already relocated by our people. Torres hesitated. But they left a message, sir. They took Mrs. Robinson's wedding photo, the one from her nightstand. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Isaac's face became a mask of controlled fury. Where are they now? Gone. But they made sure our surveillance caught them leaving. They want you to know they can reach her any time they want. Clara stood on shaking legs, the documents forgotten. They were in my home. They touched my things. Isaac's hand caught her elbow, steadying her. Torres. Pull every available man. I want eyes on every Rossi location within the hour, and find out who authorized that incursion." "Yes, sir." Torres disappeared. Clara turned to Isaac, fear and rage warring in her chest. "What does this mean?" His dark eyes met hers, and for the first time since the café, she saw something that might have been worry. "It means they're not playing games anymore. They're sending a message." His grip on her arm tightened. "You're not just leverage, Clara. You're the weakness they think they can use to bring me down." "Then what do we do?" Isaac's expression hardened into something terrifying and absolute. "We prove them wrong." The penthouse felt different when they returned. The air was charged, electric with tension. Isaac's security team had doubled men in dark suits, stationed at every entrance, phones buzzing constantly. Weapons no longer concealed, but openly displayed. Clara recognized the shift immediately. This wasn't protection anymore. This was preparation for war. Isaac disappeared into his office with 4 men she'd never seen before. Older, harder, with faces that had seen violence and delivered it in equal measure. Their voices carried through the closed door, low and rapid in a mixture of English and Italian. She stood in the living room, feeling useless again, when Rosita appeared with chamomile tea and concern etched across her face. "You should rest, mija. You look pale." "I can't rest." Clara wrapped her arms around herself, still seeing her apartment in her mind. Door kicked in, belongings scattered. The sanctity of her last private space violated. They were in my home. They touched everything I had left of him. "Mr. Vega will handle it." That's what everyone keeps saying. But what does handle it mean? More violence? More people hurt because I'm... She stopped, voice breaking. Rosita set down the tea and pulled Clara into an unexpected embrace. "You listen to me. This is not your fault. These men, they would have found some excuse for war whether you existed or not. You are just the match." The kindling was already there. Clara pulled back, wiping her eyes. "I don't want to be the reason people die." "Then help Mr. Vega find who lit the fire." The office door opened. One of the older men emerged, salt and pepper hair, expensive suit, a scar running from his temple to his jaw. He nodded curtly to Clara as he passed, followed by the others. Isaac appeared in the doorway, exhaustion written across his face. "Clara, I need you." She followed him into the office where papers covered every surface maps of the city, financial records, photographs of men she didn't recognize. He gestured to a laptop open on the desk. "You're good with numbers, with finding patterns." He pulled up a series of spreadsheets. "These are my organization's loan records for the past 3 years. Every transaction, every payment, every outstanding debt. I need you to find anything that doesn't match protocol." Clara sank into the chair, studying the screen. "What am I looking for?" "Loans that were issued without my authorization, without proper channels." Isaac leaned against the desk beside her. "Someone in my organization has been operating outside the system. Your husband's loan wasn't the only one. I'm certain of it." She scrolled through the data, her bookkeeper's brain automatically categorizing, cross-referencing. "You think someone's been running their own operation using your name?" "Yes, and using the profits to fund something I can't see yet." His phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowned, then ignored it. "The Rossis are old school. They don't have the capital or the infrastructure to challenge me directly. But if someone inside my organization is feeding them resources, they could destabilize you from within," Clara finished. "Exactly." She worked in silence for 20 minutes, Isaac pacing behind her, taking calls in Italian that grew increasingly tense. Finally, she stopped. "Here." She pointed to a cluster of transactions. "These loans, 15 of them over 18 months, were all issued by the same loan officer. But they're structured differently than your standard protocol. Higher interest rates, shorter payment windows, and look at the collateral terms." Isaac leaned over her shoulder, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. "Terminal access. They're all leveraging port access. Like my husband's loan." Clara's pulse quickened. "But these are larger amounts, and none of them list a guarantor approval code. Every other loan in your system has one except these 15. Isaac's jaw clenched. "Who issued them?" She clicked through to the loan officer information. A name appeared. Dominic Ferraro, Senior Operations Manager, East Docks Division. The room went very still. "Dom." Isaac's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of betrayal. "He's been with me for 8 years. Since I took Terminal 7 from the Rosses. Clara turned in her chair to face him. Is it possible he's still loyal to them? That he never really switched sides? It's possible. Isaac's expression had gone cold, calculating. Or he was turned. Money, threats, family leverage. There are a dozen ways to flip someone. He pulled out his phone, typed quickly, then waited. 30 seconds later, it buzzed with a response. His face darkened. What? Clara asked. Dom called in sick this morning. First time in 8 years. Isaac pocketed his phone. Torres is checking his apartment now. You think he ran? I think he knows we're getting close. The elevator dinged. Torres burst into the penthouse, his usually composed face flushed with urgency. Sir, you need to see this. He handed Isaac a tablet. On the screen was security footage from the underground garage, grainy, black and white, time-stamped from 40 minutes ago. Clara watched as a man in a dark coat emerged from the elevator, looked directly at the camera, and smiled. Then he raised his hand and drew a finger across his throat. That's Dom, Isaac confirmed, his voice like ice. There's more. Torres swiped to another video. He uploaded this to a private server 20 minutes ago. It's set to broadcast publicly in 12 hours, unless he deactivates it. He pressed play. The video showed Clara in the cafe 4 nights ago, sitting alone at her table. Then Isaac sliding into the chair beside her, his arm around her shoulders, his mouth close to her ear. The footage was clear enough to see the intimacy of the moment. The protective way he held her, the way she'd taken his hand and stood, and beneath the video a caption, Vega's new weakness, the widow who'll start a war. Clara's blood went cold. He's going to expose you, she whispered. Show everyone that you're protecting me, that I matter to you. Yes. Isaac's expression was murderous. And when the other families see that footage, they'll know exactly where to apply pressure. Torres spoke carefully. Sir, we can find him. We can stop the broadcast, but we need to move now. Isaac stared at the frozen image on the screen, Clara's face caught in candlelight, fear and hope warring in her expression. Then he looked at her directly, and she saw the decision forming behind his eyes. No, his voice was absolute. We don't hide from this. We use it. Clara stood. What are you talking about? Dom thinks you're my weakness. The Rossies think you're leverage they can exploit. A dangerous smile curved Isaac's mouth. So we let them try. We arrange a meeting. Neutral ground. We offer and exchange you for information about who's been running the unauthorized loans. You want to use me as bait, Clara said slowly. I want to draw out everyone who's been playing games with my territory. Isaac moved closer, his eyes burning with intensity. But I won't do it without your consent. This is dangerous, Clara. More dangerous than anything you've faced so far. She thought about her apartment, violated and empty. About her husband's lies that had followed her even into death. About 2 years of being powerless, while the world made decisions for her. When? She asked. Isaac's smile widened. Tomorrow night, the docks, where all of this started. Clara took a breath and met his gaze without flinching. Then let's finish it. The docks at night were a different world. Shipping containers stacked like metal mountains, floodlights casting harsh shadows across concrete, the smell of salt water and diesel thick in the air. Clara stood beside Isaac's car, the cold October wind cutting through the black coat Rosita had insisted she wear proper this time, tailored and warm, not the borrowed armor from the cafe. Isaac stood 5 feet away, phone pressed to his ear, flanked by Torres and Mitchell. Another dozen men she recognized from the penthouse were positioned throughout the dock on container tops, behind forklifts, invisible in shadows but undeniably present. You don't have to do this, Isaac said for the 3rd time in the past hour. Clara pulled the coat tighter. Yes, I do. They'd gone over the plan a dozen times. Dominic Ferraro had agreed to the meeting neutral ground, minimal security, an exchange of information. He wanted assurances that Isaac wouldn't retaliate against his family. Isaac wanted the names of everyone involved in the unauthorized loan operation, and Clara was the guarantee both sides would negotiate in good faith. Headlights appeared at the far end of the dock. 2 black SUVs, moving slowly across the broken asphalt. They stopped 50 yards away, engines idling, high beams painting Isaac and Clara in harsh white light. Isaac's hand found her elbow. Stay behind me until I say otherwise. 4 men emerged from the vehicles. Clara recognized Dominic from the security photos, mid-40s, stocky build, receding hairline. The other 3 were younger, harder, with the cold eyes of men who'd killed before and would again without hesitation. But it was the fifth figure that made Clara's breath catch. A woman, tall, elegant, silver hair pulled into a sleek chignon, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Clara's annual salary. She moved with the confidence of someone who owned every room she entered. "Isabella Rossi," Isaac murmured. "Family matriarch. I wasn't expecting her." The group stopped 20 feet away. Isabella stepped forward, her age-lined face beautiful in its severity. "Isaac Vega." Her voice was cultured, accented with old-world Italian. "You've caused quite a disruption to my evening." "Isabella, still playing games with other people's territories, I see." "Territories." She smiled without warmth. Such a masculine concept. Borders and boundaries and lines in sand. When really, business is much simpler than that. It's about leverage. And you, dear boy, have handed me the perfect leverage. Her eyes shifted to Clara, appraising and dismissive in equal measure. "The widow. I hear you've developed quite an attachment." Clara forced herself to meet that cold gaze without flinching. Isaac's voice went hard. "This meeting was with Dominic, not you. Dominic works for me now. He has for the past year." Isabella gestured, and Dominic stepped forward reluctantly. "He's been very useful. Issuing loans in your name. Creating debt you didn't authorize. Building a paper trail that makes you look either incompetent or complicit." Clara's mind raced. You wanted Isaac to look like he was breaking his own rules, destabilizing his own operation. "Smart girl." Isabella's smile widened. "When the other families see that Vega can't control his own loan officers, can't manage his own territory, they'll start questioning whether he deserves to hold Terminal 7 at all. And when they start questioning..." She spread her hands. "Opportunities arise." "You want a war," Isaac said flatly. "I want what you took from my family." Isabella's cultured mask cracked, showing the steel beneath. "Terminal 7 was ours for 30 years. You walked in with your money, and your lawyers, and your moral superiority, and you took it, made us look weak, made us sell at a fraction of what it was worth. It was worth nothing when I bought it. You'd run it into the ground. It was ours." The words echoed across the dock. Isabella composed herself, smoothing imaginary wrinkles from her suit. "But theft requires repayment, Isaac. So I've been patient, building leverage, waiting for the perfect opportunity." She nodded toward Clara, and then she appeared. A widow with debts she couldn't pay, a direct line to your organization through her husband's fumbling attempts at smuggling, and best of all, a woman who makes the great Isaac Vega look human. Clara felt Isaac tense beside her, but his voice remained calm. "You orchestrated Thomas Robinson's death." "I orchestrated his debt," Isabella corrected. "His death was convenient timing. The fall, the head injury, these things happen to men who panic when they realize they've been trafficking weapons for people much more dangerous than they understood." Rage flooded Clara's veins, hot and consuming. He was a person. He had a life. A wife who he lied to, who he betrayed with his greed and his weakness. Isabella's eyes glittered. "Don't mourn him, child. He would have destroyed you eventually. I simply accelerated the timeline." Clara lunged forward before she could think, but Isaac's arm shot out, catching her around the waist and pulling her back against him. "Easy," he murmured against her ear. "That's what she wants. Give her nothing." Clara trembled with fury, but forced herself to breathe. To think. "You still haven't explained what you want tonight," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "You already have your leverage. You have the video of us. You have the loan records showing Dominic's unauthorized activity. So why are we here?" Isabella studied her with new interest. "Because I'm offering Vega a choice. Walk away from Terminal 7. Transfer operational control back to my family. And I'll destroy every piece of evidence that connects you to this mess. The widow goes free. The loans disappear. Everyone moves forward. And if I refuse?" Isaac asked. "Then the video goes public. Every family in this city sees that you've gone soft over a woman. They'll test you, challenge you. And when you're busy protecting her, my people will systematically dismantle everything you've built." Isabella's smile was poison. "You can have your empire or your weakness, Isaac, but you can't have both." The dock went silent except for water lapping against concrete and wind whistling through metal containers. Clara felt Isaac's heart beating against her back where he still held her. Felt the tension in his body, the calculation happening behind his eyes. Then she stepped out of his arms and walked forward. "Mrs. Rossi," she said clearly, You made one critical mistake. Isabella raised an eyebrow. Did I? Clara reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a flash drive. You assumed I was just a widow. Just leverage. Just someone to be used and discarded. She held up the drive. But I'm also a bookkeeper, and for the past 3 days, I've been analyzing every financial transaction connected to the unauthorized loans, every payment, every transfer, every offshore account. She glanced back at Isaac, who nodded once. Clara continued, These loans weren't just issued without authorization. The money never went to the borrowers. It went straight to shell companies owned by the Rossi family. You weren't lending money, you were laundering it, using Isaac's infrastructure to clean funds from illegal operations. Isabella's expression finally cracked. You can't prove that. I can, and I did. Clara's voice strengthened. Every transaction is documented on this drive, complete with account numbers, timestamps, and digital signatures that trace directly back to Dominic and 4 other Rossi operatives embedded in Isaac's organization. She tossed the drive to Isaac, who caught it smoothly. So here's the real choice, Mrs. Rossi. You walk away now. You pull your people out of Isaac's operation. You stop using my dead husband's ghost as a weapon. And maybe Isaac doesn't hand this evidence to the federal prosecutors who've been trying to build a RICO case against your family for the past 2 years. The dock erupted into motion. Dominic reached for his weapon. Isabella raised her hand sharply, stopping him. You're bluffing, she said, but uncertainty flickered across her face. Isaac stepped forward, positioning himself beside Clara. She's not, and you know it, because you trained your people to be thorough, Isabella. Every transaction logged, every transfer documented. You kept records because that's how you maintain control. He held up the drive, but control is only power when no one else has the keys. For a long moment, Isabella stared at them both. Then, slowly, she smiled. Not with warmth, with respect. Well played, Mrs. Robinson. She turned to Dominic. We're leaving, but, Dominic started. Now. They retreated to the SUVs. Before climbing in, Isabella looked back one last time. This isn't over, Isaac. Yes, he said quietly. It is. The vehicles disappeared into the night. Clara's legs gave out. Isaac caught her, lowering them both to the cold concrete. His arms wrapped around her as she shook with adrenaline and relief, and the weight of what they'd just survived. You were brilliant, he murmured against her hair. Terrifying and brilliant. She laughed, the sound half sob. I thought I was going to throw up. You can throw up now if you want. Maybe later. She pulled back to look at him, this dangerous man who'd claimed her in a cafe and changed everything. Is it really over? Isaac's expression softened. The war is. The rest. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. The rest is just beginning. The penthouse felt different when they returned just after midnight. Quieter. The security presence had eased still there, but no longer suffocating. Torres nodded to them as they stepped off the elevator, then discreetly retreated to give them privacy. Rosita had left coffee and sandwiches on the kitchen counter with a note. Eat, both of you. R. Clara sank onto the leather sofa, exhaustion finally catching up with her. Her hands were still trembling from adrenaline, from standing 20 feet away from the woman who'd orchestrated her husband's death and somehow finding the courage to call her bluff. Isaac disappeared into his office, returning moments later with a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. He poured generously, handed one to Clara, then settled into the chair across from her. To surviving your first syndicate negotiation, he said, raising his glass. Clara laughed weakly and took a drink. The whiskey burned all the way down, warming her from the inside out. Is it always like that? No. Usually there's more shooting. Isaac's expression was serious, but his eyes held a glimmer of something lighter. You handled yourself better than men I've worked with for years. I was terrified. I know. That's what made it brave. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the city lights twinkling through the windows like 1,000 distant promises. Then Isaac leaned forward, elbows on his knees, glass dangling between his fingers. There's something you need to know. About your husband. About how he really died. Clara's stomach tightened. I thought Isabella said it was convenient timing. An accident. She lied. Isaac took a drink, choosing his words carefully. I had my people pull the police reports, the autopsy, the witness statements. Your husband didn't fall accidentally, Clara. He jumped. The glass nearly slipped from her fingers. What? The night he died, He'd just learned that the people he was smuggling weapons for were connected to the Rossi family. He'd thought he was working for independent contractors, criminals. Yes, but small time. When he realized the scale of what he'd gotten involved in, the kind of people who now owned him, Isaac's voice was gentle. He panicked. Called the Rossis, tried to back out. They told him there was no backing out. That he'd keep moving shipments, or they'd hurt you. Clara's vision blurred. He killed himself to protect me? The coroner ruled it accidental because there was no note. No clear evidence of intent. But the security footage from the building across the street shows him standing on that ledge for 20 minutes before he stepped off. Isaac set down his glass and moved to sit beside her on the sofa. He made a terrible choice getting involved with them, but his last choice, that one, was about love. The tears came then, hot and unstoppable. Not the grief she'd carried for 2 years, mourning a man she thought had abandoned her through carelessness. This was different, sharper, more complex. He lied to me about everything else, she whispered. The gambling, the debts, the smuggling. Every day he came home and pretended we were fine when we were drowning. Yes, but he died trying to save me from consequences I didn't even know existed. Yes. Clara pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to contain the storm of emotions. I don't know how to feel about that. I don't know if I should forgive him, or hate him, or... You can feel all of it, Isaac said quietly. Anger and grief and betrayal and love. They don't cancel each other out, Clara. They just exist together. That's what it means to lose someone complicated. She looked at him through tears. This man who dealt in violence and territory and control, speaking about emotion with unexpected wisdom. How do you know that? Because I lost someone complicated too. Isaac's expression shifted, something old and painful flickering across his face. My brother. He worked for the Rossis before I took Terminal 7. When I made my move, I asked him to come with me, to leave their organization and help me build something better. What happened? He refused, said loyalty meant something, said I was a traitor for leaving. Isaac's jaw tightened. 6 months later, the Rossis used him as a scapegoat when a shipment went wrong, put a bullet in his head and dumped him in the harbor. Clara's breath caught. Isaac. I loved him. I was furious with him for choosing them over me. I grieved him. I blamed myself for not forcing him to leave. He met her eyes, and eventually, I learned to carry all of it without letting it destroy me. That's what you'll have to do too. She reached for his hand without thinking, their fingers intertwining naturally. His grip was warm, steady, anchoring her to the present when the past felt like quicksand. Thomas made terrible choices, she said slowly, working through the thoughts as she spoke them. He lied. He gambled. He got involved with people who destroyed him, but he also loved me enough to die rather than let them use me. Yes. I can mourn that love, while still being angry about the lies. Yes. Clara took a shaky breath, and I can let him go. Finally. Really let him go. Isaac's thumb traced circles against the back of her hand. That's the hardest part. Letting go of who you thought they were and accepting who they actually were. The good and the terrible all mixed together. How long did it take you? To let go of my brother? Isaac considered. Years, but I was doing it alone. I didn't have anyone to tell me it was okay to feel everything at once. And now I do. Clara looked at their joined hands, at the tattoos curling up his wrist, at the physical manifestation of a connection she hadn't asked for but couldn't imagine losing. You saved me, Isaac, at that cafe, in the parking garage, at the docks tonight. You keep saving me. No. He shifted closer, his free hand coming up to cup her face with surprising gentleness. You saved yourself, Clara. I just gave you the space to do it. You stood up to Isabella Rossi. You refused to hide. You demanded truth even when it hurt. That wasn't me. That was all you. She leaned into his touch, something warm and terrifying and inevitable blooming in her chest. What happens now? Isabella said she'd back off, but she will. For now. The evidence you compiled is too damaging. She can't risk a federal investigation. Isaac's expression grew serious. But you can't go back to your old life, Clara. Your apartment is compromised. Your identity is known to people who might not honor Isabella's retreat. You need protection. A new start. Are you asking me to stay here? I'm offering you options. His dark eyes searched hers. New identity. Relocation to another city. Financial security. Whatever you need to rebuild safely. Clara's heart hammered. And if I don't want to leave? The question hung between them, heavy with implications neither had voiced until now. Isaac's thumb brushed across her cheekbone, achingly tender. Then you stay. And we figure out what this is, what we are. What are we? Clara whispered. I don't know yet. His honesty was devastating. But I know I've never let anyone speak in my negotiations. I've never brought anyone to the secure floor. I've never cared whether someone stayed or left until you. Clara's tears had stopped, replaced by something deeper. A choice she'd been moving toward since the moment he sat beside her in that cafe and whispered, "Pretend you're my wife." I'm not ready for this, she admitted. I'm still grieving, still angry, still figuring out who I am without Thomas's ghost following me. I know, but I don't want to leave. Isaac's smile was small, genuine, transformative. Then don't. He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away, to refuse, to choose differently. She didn't. Their lips met softly, tentatively, a question and an answer all at once. Clara's hand came up to rest against his chest, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady beneath expensive fabric and warm skin. When they pulled apart, her voice was barely above a whisper. I'm still a mess. I run a criminal empire, Isaac replied. We're both complicated. Clara laughed, the sound lighter than anything she'd felt in years. Where do we even start? Here. He stood, pulling her up with him. Now, with truth and time and no more pretending. She looked around the penthouse, this place that had been a cage and a sanctuary, and everything in between. Okay, she said softly. Let's start here. 3 days after the docks, Clara woke to find Isaac already gone. A note on the kitchen counter in his precise handwriting. Rooftop. Come when you're ready. She found Rosita preparing breakfast, humming softly to herself. He's been up there since dawn, the older woman said with a knowing smile. Thinking too much, that one. Maybe you can help him stop. Clara accepted coffee and a croissant, then took the private elevator that led to the building's rooftop garden, a space she hadn't known existed until now. The doors opened onto an urban oasis. Potted trees, carefully maintained flower beds, a small fountain that somehow made the city noise fade into background whisper. And at the far edge, leaning against the glass barrier overlooking the city 45 stories below, stood Isaac. He'd shed his usual armor, no suit jacket, just a white shirt with sleeves rolled to his elbows, dark slacks, his hair slightly disheveled from the wind. He looked younger like this, less untouchable. You found me, he said without turning. You left instructions. Clara joined him at the railing, setting her coffee on the wide ledge. This is beautiful. I didn't know this was here. I bought the building partly for this space, somewhere I could think without walls closing in. He glanced at her, something vulnerable in his expression. I wanted to show you. Before. Before what? Isaac turned to face her fully, the morning sun painting gold across his features. Before I say something that changes everything, and you decide whether you want to stay or run. Clara's heart kicked against her ribs. Isaac. That night at the cafe. He cut her off gently. I told you I was protecting territory, that those men were a threat to my operations, that you were leverage I couldn't afford to lose. I remember. I lied. The confession came out raw, honest. Or not lied exactly, but I didn't tell you the whole truth. Clara waited, barely breathing. The moment I saw you sitting there hood up, candle burning down, trying so hard to be invisible while the whole world watched you, something shifted. Isaac's hands gripped the railing. I've walked past 1,000 people in trouble, made calculations about who's worth protecting and who isn't. It's survival in this business. You can't save everyone, but you saved me. Because you weren't just territory or leverage or a tactical decision. His dark eyes found hers. You were a woman sitting alone in a cafe waiting for cruelty with your shoulders back and your chin up, and I looked at you and thought her. I don't know why. I don't know how, but in that moment, Clara, you became the most important person in the room. The city sprawled below them, millions of lives intersecting and diverging, and Clara felt like she was standing at the center of the only moment that mattered. You didn't know me, she whispered. No, but I wanted to. Isaac moved closer, his hand coming up to brush her hair back from her face, a gesture that had become familiar, grounding. Every day since, I've told myself it was strategy. That keeping you close made tactical sense. That protecting you served my interests. And now I can't pretend anymore. His voice dropped. You stood up to Isabella Rossi. You solved a financial conspiracy my own people missed. You refused every easy option I offered because you wanted truth more than safety. You're brilliant and terrifying and stronger than you believe." Clara's eyes burned with unshed tears. "Isaac, I'm still broken. I'm still grieving a man who lied to me. I'm still figuring out who I am without the weight of his mistakes." "I know, and I'm not asking you to be fixed." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "I'm asking you to let me be broken with you, to build something real out of the wreckage we've both been carrying." "I don't know how to do this," she admitted. "I don't know how to trust again. How to love someone who lives in a world where people die for making the wrong choice." "Neither do I." Isaac's honesty was devastating. "I've spent 10 years building walls, keeping people at arm's length, treating relationships like transactions, but you walked through every defense I had like they didn't exist." He stepped back slightly, reaching into his pocket. For a heart-stopping moment, Clara thought, but he pulled out a key. Simple, silver, unremarkable. "This is the key to the penthouse," he said quietly. "Not the secure floor, not a guest room, the actual home I live in, the space I've never shared with anyone." He pressed it into her palm. "I'm not asking you to marry me, Clara. I'm not asking you to commit to forever when you're still learning how to commit to tomorrow. But I'm asking you to stay. Really stay. Not as someone I'm protecting or someone who's useful to my operations." His voice roughened. "Stay because you want to. Because this thing between us, whatever it is, matters enough to explore. Because when I wake up, I want you to be the first person I see." Clara stared at the key, her vision blurring. "What if I'm not ready?" "Then you take however long you need. Days, weeks, months." Isaac's expression was open, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. "I'll wait, because you're worth waiting for." The wind whipped around them, carrying the sound of traffic and construction, and a city that never stopped moving. Clara thought about the woman she'd been 4 days ago sitting in a cafe, waiting for her life to end. And the woman she was now standing on a rooftop, holding a key that represented a future she hadn't dared imagine. "I'm terrified," she whispered. "Me too. I don't know if I can be what you need. You already are." Clara looked up at him, this dangerous, complicated, unexpectedly gentle man who'd claimed her in a moment of crisis, and somehow made her believe she could be more than her grief. And she made a choice. She stepped forward, closing the distance between them, and kissed him. Not tentative like before, not questioning. This kiss was answer and promise and surrender all at once. Isaac's arms wrapped around her, pulling her close, and she felt safe in a way that had nothing to do with security teams or bulletproof glass. When they pulled apart, she was crying and smiling simultaneously. "I'll stay," she said. "Not because I'm healed, not because I have all the answers, but because for the first time in 2 years, I want to see what happens tomorrow." Isaac's smile was radiant. "Tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that." He removed his suit jacket from where he'd draped it over a nearby bench and settled it around her shoulders. It smelled like him cologne and smoke and safety. "Come on," he said, taking her hand. "I want to show you something else." "What?" "The view from the living room, the actual living room, where I drink my coffee and read the news and exist as a person instead of a position." Clara laughed, threading her fingers through his. "That sounds terrifying." "Probably, but we'll be terrified together." They walked toward the elevator, her hand in his jacket around her shoulders, the key to his home pressed against her palm, and somewhere between the rooftop and the promise of tomorrow, Clara Robinson stopped being the poor widow who sat alone at a cafe. She became the woman who chose to stay. The cafe looked exactly the same. Same brass tables, same checkered floor, same Edison bulbs casting warm amber light across couples sharing wine and conversation. Clara stood outside Café Lumière on the corner of 5th and Morrison, watching through rain-streaked windows as life continued exactly as it had a week ago. A week. 7 days since Isaac Vega sat beside her and changed everything. "You don't have to do this," Isaac said quietly. He stood behind her, close enough that she could feel his presence but far enough to let her make this choice alone. "Yes, I do." Clara pulled her coat tighter, the new one Isaac had insisted on buying, properly fitted and warm. "I need to see it, to face it without fear." She pushed through the door, bell chiming overhead. The warmth hit her immediately, along with the smell of espresso and fresh bread. A few heads turned, but no one recognized her. No one saw the widow who'd sat alone at table 7. She walked directly to that corner table. The candle was fresh, unlit. The chairs were empty. Clara sank into the seat she'd occupied, back to the wall, window to her left. From this angle, she could see the entire cafe, see the bar where two men had watched her with predatory patience, see the entrance where Isaac had appeared like an answer to a prayer she hadn't known how to voice. Isaac didn't follow immediately. He ordered 2 coffees at the counter, giving her space, then approached slowly. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the chair beside her. Clara smiled. "You didn't ask last time." "Last time I was claiming territory," he sat, setting a coffee in front of her. "Tonight I'm asking permission." She wrapped her hands around the warm cup, letting the heat seep into her fingers. "Do you remember what you said when you sat down? Don't look at them. They're not here for you anymore." "You were right. They weren't." Clara took a sip, the bitter espresso grounding her in the present. "But I was still here for them, still waiting, still letting other people's decisions control my life. And now?" She looked around the cafe at the couples, the solo diners reading books, the barista crafting intricate foam art. Normal people living normal lives without debts and violence and syndicate wars lurking in the shadows. "Now I'm here because I chose to be," she said softly. "Not because someone told me to come, not because I'm running from creditors or hiding from the past, because I wanted to face the place where everything changed and prove to myself that I'm not afraid anymore." Isaac's hand found hers on the table, fingers intertwining. "You were never afraid. Not really. Fear would have made you run. You stood your ground. I was terrified. Courage isn't the absence of fear, Clara. It's choosing action despite it." She turned to look at him fully, this man who'd walked into her life during her darkest moment and somehow illuminated all the broken pieces she'd been trying to hide. "I've made a decision." His expression grew serious. "Tell me." "I'm keeping the key." She pulled it from her pocket, the silver catching candlelight. "I'm staying at the penthouse. With you. Really staying. Not just hiding until the danger passes." Isaac's grip on her hand tightened fractionally. "You're sure?" "No, I'm not sure about anything." Clara laughed softly. "I don't know if I'm ready for a relationship. I don't know if I can handle your world long term. I don't know who I am anymore without Thomas's ghost defining me. But I know I want to find out. And I know I want to do it with you." She met his dark eyes steadily. "You gave me choice when everyone else in my life took it away. Even Thomas, with his lies and his debts, he made decisions for me without asking. You asked. Every time. You offered options and waited for me to choose, because your choice matters more than my convenience." "Exactly." Clara set down her coffee and stood, pulling Isaac up with her. "So I'm choosing this. Choosing you. Choosing to build something new instead of mourning something that was never real." Isaac rose smoothly, and suddenly they were standing in the exact position they'd been in a week ago, his arm around her shoulders, her hand in his, the cafe watching with mild curiosity, but everything was different now. "Walk with me?" Isaac asked quietly. Clara smiled, remembering his command from that first night. "Pretend you're my wife. Stand up. Walk with me." "I'm not pretending anymore," she said. "Neither am I." They walked toward the exit together. Not fleeing, not hiding, simply leaving because they'd chosen to. Outside, rain had turned the sidewalk slick and reflective. The black car still waited at the curb, Torres behind the wheel, but Isaac made no move toward it. Instead, he turned Clara to face him, cupping her face in both hands. "I need you to understand something," he said seriously. "My life is complicated, dangerous. There will be threats. There will be decisions that keep me awake at night. I can't promise you safety or simplicity. I don't want simplicity. I want truth. Then here's truth." His thumbs brushed across her cheekbones. "I'm falling in love with you, Clara Robinson. Have been since the moment you looked at me in this cafe and decided to trust a dangerous stranger over certain destruction. And if you stay, if you really choose this, I will spend every day proving that your trust wasn't misplaced." Clara's breath caught. The words she'd been afraid to name, afraid to feel, suddenly spoken aloud with devastating clarity. "I don't know if I love you yet," she admitted. "I don't know if what I feel is love or gratitude or just connection after so much isolation. That's okay. But I want to find out. I want time to discover who we are when we're not running from threats or solving conspiracies. I want normal moments and complicated conversations and the chance to build something real. Then that's what we'll do." Isaac's smile was soft, genuine. "Starting now. What do you want to do tonight? No obligations, no security concerns. Just you and me in the city, Clara considered, then grinned. I want terrible takeout and a movie I don't have to think about. I want to sit on your very expensive sofa in comfortable clothes and just exist, without danger or drama or life-changing revelations. That might be the best offer I've had all week. He opened the car door, and she slid in. But this time, she didn't press herself against the far side. She settled in the middle, and when Isaac joined her, she leaned against him naturally. Torres pulled into traffic without comment, though Clara caught his smile in the rearview mirror. Isaac's arm wrapped around her shoulders, the same protective gesture from a week ago, but transformed by choice and context into something tender. Clara? He said quietly. Yes? Thank you. For staying. For choosing this even when it would have been easier to run. She tilted her head up to look at him. Thank you for sitting beside me when you could have walked past. For seeing something worth protecting when I couldn't see it myself. Always, he promised. The city slid past the windows, lights, and movement, and endless possibility. Clara thought about the woman she'd been, sitting alone at table 7 with a final notice in her purse, and no hope left. And the woman she was becoming, sitting beside a man who'd claimed her in a moment of crisis, and somehow made her believe in futures instead of endings. She wasn't healed. She wasn't whole. The grief over Thomas, the anger about his lies, the complexity of loving and hating someone simultaneously, all of it still existed, still hurt. But she was choosing forward motion, choosing connection, choosing to believe that broken people could build beautiful things if they were brave enough to try. The car pulled into the underground garage. Torres opened the door, nodded respectfully, and disappeared to give them privacy. Isaac offered his hand. Clara took it, and together, they walked toward the elevator, not as protector and protected, not as syndicate boss and widow, but as two complicated people choosing each other, one moment at a time. When the elevator doors closed, Clara looked at her reflection in the polished metal. She looked different, stronger, more present. What are you thinking? Isaac asked. Clara smiled. I'm thinking that the poor widow who sat alone at the cafe doesn't exist anymore. No? No, she became someone else, someone braver, someone who walks beside mafia bosses and negotiates with crime families and chooses her own future even when it terrifies her. Isaac pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. I like her, this new version. Me too, Clara whispered. Me too. The elevator rose toward the penthouse, toward home, toward tomorrow, toward all the complicated, beautiful, terrifying moments waiting to be chosen. And Clara Robinson, no longer defined by loss or debt or someone else's mistakes, walked into her future with her eyes wide open and her hand held tight, because this time, when someone asked her to walk with them, she wasn't pretending, she was choosing, and that made all the difference. Thanks for sticking with this story until the very end. You're the reason these stories feel alive. If you're ready for another powerful journey, just tap the next video on your screen. And before you go, leave a quick comment and rate this story from 1 to 10. I'm excited to read your thoughts.